Okay, welcome to another week of social psychology online. So I hope that you've enjoyed the class so far. I will try to keep doing these videos as time allows. So I will want you to jump into the textbook a little bit more this week. It goes into a little bit more depth. It is important that you grasp some of the concepts from this week because the rest of the class is built on a lot of the research that is provided in this week's chapter. So, with that being said, let's jump in. First of all, if those of you who watched the video on individualist versus collectivist societies, I hope that you didn't take the collectivist. I used ancient India, a couple hundred years ago to illustrate a collectivist society understanding. That's not every one of them. I mean, a lot of the Asian cultures also have a collectivist understanding. We'll mention that briefly this week, but I didn't mean to throw that in a negative light. I know a lot of the assumptions about the caste system are, I guess you'd say, well, they tend not to allow folks to have like an egalitarian, to have any self-determination, from what we consider self-determination here in the Western world. I mainly did that not to throw that under the bus. You're welcome to make your own, come up with your own, moral compass regarding, that particular society. But not all. I'm not saying that every attribute about a collectivist society is bad. And that was not my intention. I was mainly just trying to get you to be aware that people's minds work differently in different cultures. We'll have a couple of illustrations of that this week coming up on one of these slides. So let's go ahead and go forward. One of the things that I want us to know and really kind of get to this week is how much that we, as people who think that we've got it all under control, we kind of understand things from our perspective, a lot of research indicates that our perceptions are pretty faulty. One of the things that we assume is that other people think like us and are like us. And so if you go to page, this is at the beginning of the chapter, we assume that other people believe like we do, when in fact, they do not. That might be from last chapter, sorry. I've done a lot of reading, so bear with me. Okay, let's jump in here. Okay, so you can read my quotes there from Thomas Jefferson and Bertrand Russell. One of the things that I'm going to continue to impress upon us to try to understand us as people is that we are all comprised of, and I will go across cultures and say this. I'll say that we're all comprised of our thoughts, what we're thinking, our feelings, our emotions about situations, and our behaviors, what we're doing. Now, that was think, feel, do. Think, feel, do cycle, cognitive behavioral understanding of human behavior. That leaves out a fundamental piece, and what we're going to get to today is we're going to really start talking about beliefs and how beliefs then impact our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors. Because if this is us over here, that's just not going to work. It didn't do that last time. If this is us over here, our beliefs are clouding the information we get from the outside world. Our beliefs are shaping that, and that's what you will see by the information that we discuss today. And understanding beliefs and how they may skew reality. Each one of us, as we discussed in chapter 2, have a self-serving bias. How is that then going to affect our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors, and how we interact with the outside world? So, why are social beliefs important? Why is it important for us to get an understanding of how folks as a whole perceive other people? Well, that's kind of the essence of social psychology. Social beliefs are important. They, number one, influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Presumably, they've helped us to survive. We've got 7,200,000,000 people on the planet, so apparently they're helping us to survive. Provide capacity for automatic, efficient, and intuitive thinking. So a lot of research has gone into this. Why do our beliefs then, why do they jump out front and automatically determine? Because a lot of times we'll see something, we'll just have an automatic belief about it, and we'll go on. Kind of like a prejudice. Now, we've been taught, and not necessarily wrongly, that prejudice is bad. But it's also been, to a human survival, if we see something moving really fast at us, not to think, what's going to happen if that really fast object impacts me in the chest? We don't have time to sit there and go down and think about, our deepest beliefs and go back and reprocess it. A lot of times we just act on instinct. And so this cognitive efficiency produces occasional errors. Things are occasionally wrong. And especially in regards to our perceptions of other people around us. Now, in chapter 1 we talked about the illusion of transparency and the spotlight effect, where we're automatically assuming that people know more about us or are paying attention to us more than we think, and they're really not. And so, we have these errors. But we also have errors in what we think about other people. So what would happen if you had to constantly reassess your deepest belief in each situation? Well, it'd just be impossible. So, if I ran into 20 people at the supermarket, and I had to just sit there and think, okay, I need to think about that person, and you constantly just go ahead and reassess what you might think about each one of those people, on a deep level, we'd never get anything done. So, in one way to think about it is this, the way the beliefs work is they produce an efficiency for us. However, our beliefs can be really pretty skewed and wrong. One of these things is illustrated in the overconfidence phenomenon. And so this is in your book. I encourage you to go in and read about it. There's a tendency for us to be more confident than correct. To overestimate the accuracy of our beliefs. For instance, there was a study, and they gave people the opportunity to fill in the blanks. And they were trying to ascertain, I feel 98% certain, that the air distance between New Delhi and Beijing is more than blank miles, but less than blank miles. So again, they're trying to come up with and fill in the blank with, I'd probably say is more than, I don't even know how. That'd be hard for me to answer because I'm not that good on geography in the Eastern world. But respondents were only correct 70% of the time. So in other words, they just about 30% of the time overestimated their ability to, then they've got to come up with 98% certainty. People are markedly overconfident. So please go in and look at in your book on overconfidence phenomenon. We're markedly overconfident when we judge whether someone is telling the truth or not. Studies have gone in and shown we're really not that great at being able to judge when people are telling the truth. When estimating the sexual history of your dating partner. Sorry, it's just people aren't that accurate. It's kind of disturbing, really. But hey, we're here to get shook up, right? The activity preferences of their roommates. Feel like we even know our roommates better than we do. And there's a really good understanding of this and this comes from 1999 and onward. Dunning and Kruger, and these authors are still producing they're still producing studies today. I'll give you a couple of links on YouTube, but it's just basically the Dunning-Kruger effect, in essence, says that when we know a little bit about the subject, we think we know a lot more than we really do. So for instance, if I gave you a 5-minute reading on astrophysics, and astrophysics was summarized, in detail. This is the heart and soul of astrophysics. These are the things to know. And then when we took a test about our knowledge of astrophysics, we would say, you know what? I did pretty good. I did pretty good on that test. You know what? I did awesome. But what research indicates is that people who know a little bit about something tend to really strongly overestimate their knowledge about that. And the interesting thing about this is people that know more, it goes to that quote that I started the discussion with. People that know more about a subject often underestimate how well they've done on a test. So let's say you actually have somebody who's an expert in astrophysics, has a PhD in astrophysics, takes an exam. They'll actually scale themselves a little bit lower than they actually perform. You have a little bit more humility. So it's interesting that this particular quote, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts, holds a lot of weight, according to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay, let's move on. There's a confirmation bias. I'm going to have you write about Dunning-Kruger confirmation bias and the fundamental attribution error this week on the discussion post. So pay attention to these. Page 91. Confirmation bias. People tend to not like it when we're confronted with things that refute or challenge our ideas. We like to just go right down, down the freeway and say, you know what, I just want all this information that supports what I know, what I already believe, because what I believe is what matters, and that's, so what about everybody else? I know what I'm right, and so it makes everybody else wrong. A tendency to search for information that confirms one's perceptions. So in other words, we search out information that already confirms what we already believe, rather than looking for information that challenges or refutes it. Studies regarding confirmation bias now think about this. Now, confirmation bias, you might think, well, they just came up with that since it's like Facebook and social media, because people like that page, I'm blocking that person, I'm blocking that page, I'm blocking that. This been around before social media. So think about that and its impact now. Would social media tend to lessen or exaggerate this bias? So, think about that. Throw that into the mix. We also have some illusions in our belief system that there are correlations. Now, one thing that you know if you take research methodology or statistics is that you never, ever can infer causation from correlation. If two things look correlated, it doesn't mean that something caused it. I mean, let's say, violent crime and ice cream sales tend to go up together. They correlate. The same time of year, ice cream sales go up, violent crime goes up. Wow, must be, maybe there's something in that milk they're using, that ice cream, that making people violent. Well, what also happens? What's the third variable in that mix that, when those two things go up? Well, weather gets hot. So just because you have two things that are correlated, you can never infer that one caused the other. That's important. So we have this thing called illusory correlation. Perception of a relationship where none exists, or perception of a stronger relationship than actually exists. One thing causes another. If you get anything from this class, if you get anything from college, you should know, let's just throw that out there. If we understand things correctly, then more likely than not, multiple things go into causing other things. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Also an illusion of control. Perception of uncontrollable events as subject to one's control, or as more controllable than they are. So I've got a couple of slides on that in just a second. So anybody who's been through divorce, as a child, oftentimes children will say, they're the cause of it. They'll put that whole blame on themselves. Whereas that's not accurate. It's just, or that they can control the relationship, somehow get their parents back together or whatnot. Regression toward the mean, this is a statistical phenomenon. The statistical tendency for extreme scores or extreme behaviors to return towards one's average. So all this world where we see a lot of extreme behaviors, the tendency isn't to stay out there, it's to tend to come toward the average. Although it appears that we're going the other way, but those are other discussions. Attribution theory. This is another important concept. It talks about the theory of how people explain others' behavior. This is an important concept for fundamental attribution here, so follow me. Do you perceive others as having an internal versus external locus of control? What's locus of control? If you believe that somebody has an internal locus of control, it's like a dispositional attribution, internal. Enduring traits, somebody's character, their motives, a person's disposition, that'd be something internal. Versus a situational attribution, external, would it be something from their environment? Would it be something out here in the world that caused something to happen? An example of this is in page 101. Take a look and see, what is your attribution? Why is the student sleeping? So if I'm, if I'm attributing behaviors, I want to kind of look at and think about this, because I'm bound to misattribute factors to causing those behaviors. Mistakenly attributing a behavior to the wrong source. We have these things called spontaneous trait inferences. And it's almost like an effortless automatic inference of a trait after exposure to someone's behavior. So, think about your first thoughts. You're driving along in traffic, and you're speeding a little bit. You go about 5 miles over, and then here comes this person, and they cut you. They're going really slow, and they cut you off, and you got to slam on your brakes. What's your first thought about that person? That person is who knows what you might say in that particular situation. Are you going to infer that person is an altruistic, loving, fantastic citizen of the year of your town? Or are you more likely to make an inference that that person is a no good, rotten, dirty son of we have a spontaneous trait inference in many situations where we'll just look at a person, like I might see a student sleeping. Man, I'm boring, and I am boring today. I'll tell you what, this lecture has not gone well, but hang in here, it'll get better. So anyway, I might see a student sleeping and think, wow, that person doesn't give a crap about my class. You know what? They're gonna get a big fat F for participation. This course has 20 points. Well, what happens if that person studied all night for my exam? Maybe that was it. Maybe they really do care quite a bit about the class, but they studied all night for the exam or were working on their discussion posts. That's misattribution. We're all prone to that, so be aware. And this is perhaps the most important concept to get from here forward. The fundamental attribution error. We all have this tendency to underestimate situational influences and to overestimate dispositional or internal influences upon others' behaviors. In other words, we tend to put too much blame on people's character while not enough on external factors. things that are going on out here in the world. Let that sink in. This is especially true in individualistic societies. That's found on page 107. Collectivist societies, where again, you are viewing yourself as a part of something bigger than yourself, not as much. For instance, on page 107, and please follow along with all my concepts. I'm not doing the best job explaining today, but if you follow along and read, hopefully a few of these things will make a little better sense. So actually go to the top of page 108. So, we take things for granted because we speak English, we use our languages. Very few of us in the United States are bilingual, and so we aren't able to step out of our box and see things as clearly as they should be. Some languages, this top of 108, promote external attributions. In other words, instead of saying I was late, it's my fault, I was late. Spanish idiom allows one to say, the clock caused me to be late. Is that, that's kind of funny. Well, you're like, well, you were late, you should have left home earlier, or there's a situation attribution, maybe you hit a train, you don't know, but the clock caused me to be late. It takes out all the guesswork, it's the clock. Go down a little bit more. When told of someone's actions, this is kept from Hindus in India, are less likely than Americans to offer a dispositional explanation. So this is when somebody does something kind. So instead of saying she is kind, that's because, she's just a kind person. They're more likely to offer situational explanations. Her friends were with her. Interesting. So, we carry this fundamental attribution error, especially in Western cultures. You might say, well, there's a fundamental attribution error in the collectivist cultures, but that's neither here nor there. We're here to look at ourselves. Let's pull the log out of our own eye before looking at splinter in somebody else's. So, let's consider locus of control. Well, I mentioned that briefly. Locus of control basically is how you consider what's responsible for controlling a situation. Does the center or the responsibility for controlling the situation lie here, or is it primarily out here? Is it internal or is it external? For many children, like I mentioned before, for many children who live through divorce, do they adopt an illusion of control? I would say yes, in my practices. We'll talk about ACE events later. That's not for this topic. ACE events are externally controlled, but that's neither here nor there right now. Because of these misattribution errors, because of this fundamental attribution error, we often, and our tendency to, take in information that confirms that confirmatory bias, that takes in, that already confirms the beliefs that we have. Because our beliefs shape our thoughts, our feelings and behaviors, our interactions with the outside world and interactions with other people, we experience self-fulfilling prophecies all the time. Because we find causes where we look for them. It's on page 107. Often our beliefs lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy, a belief that leads to its own fulfillment. Each one of us wear a set of rose-colored glasses. And those rose-colored glasses are colored by our environment, our experiences, a lot of how we've interacted with the world. But I do want you to know that each one of us, including me, has on a pair of glasses. And so we tend to, because of the efficiency, because it's a lot more efficient to, make these quick, prejudicial almost decisions. And we'll talk about prejudice later. I'm setting the groundwork for that now. It even can lead to behavioral confirmation in others. So page 113 talks about some of this. So let's say there are two people. Let's say you really, really like somebody in your class. You really, really like somebody on campus. You really like somebody in your office. And so you're like, I don't know, they probably don't like me. And so let's say they feel that same way, but they're on the same other kind of coin. You know what? They probably don't like me. So you both may act like cool and like a little bit guarded, and so then it's confirmation. You know what? They don't like me because they don't ever talk to me. They don't make eye contact. And we can have this behavioral confirmation. There's other things that are a lot more nefarious than that situation that may lead to a lot worse outcomes where we have behavioral confirmation. So important. You're welcome to read the quote, reflect on that at the end of the reading. So hopefully you've gained something from this. Sorry, I stand around a little bit. Doing a lot up here on a Sunday, so I want to make sure that you guys had something throughout the week. Again, observe your deadlines. Thursday for your first post, Thursday at midnight, and then respond to appear in depth sometime before Sunday at midnight on, that would be the 17th. So in other words, have a good week. If you have any questions, please contact me. I think I'm about caught up on grading now, so hopefully we'll see you online. Look forward to reading what you have to say.